yesterday's news.
Hello and welcome to Old News, the programme and podcast which looks at news stories of the day through the papers and headlines of yesterday. Buses this week, after a headline in Max Radio News saying there'll be less time for pupils to use bus passes from now on. This is according to Bus Van. The school bus pass used to be valid until 6. It'll now be 5 p.m. due to schools closing earlier, it's claimed. Made me scurry back into the archives to see how bus, or at least school buses, have fared over the years. More than you might think, it has to be said, going back a fair way. When I say a fair way, I take you back almost 100 years to start, to the Isle of Man Examiner, Friday, April the 27th, 1928. Overcrowding the school buses. Education Authority has to pay more. The report of the Finance and General Purposes Committee of the Isle of Man Education Authority, as adapted by the full authority on Wednesday, contained the following item. A deputation from the Isle of Man Railway Company waited upon a subcommittee of this committee in reference to the effect of a recent prosecution of the corporation for overcrowding the school buses. It was explained that when the agreement between the railway company and the corporation to convey pupils to and from the railway station was made, it was estimated that each bus would accommodate 40 pupils, and the terms quoted were on this basis. As a result of the prosecution, the capacity of the buses has been limited to 28 pupils, thus necessitating a service of an increased number of buses. To meet a portion of the loss which will be incurred by the corporation in carrying out their agreement with the railway company up to the school summer holidays, when its contract expires, the committee recommended that the authority contribute a sum of £35 and that the contract between the railway company and the authority be varied accordingly. Well, you forget, of course, the railway used for so many school children up until, 1940s, somewhere around there. We go to the Isle of Man Examiner of Friday, August the 2nd, 1940s. Pulrose school buses, matter only shelved. The discontinuance of the special school buses which operated between Pulrose Park and the Douglas Elementary Schools was briefly referred to at a meeting of the Education Authority on Wednesday, when the hope was expressed that some arrangement might yet be reached to restore the service. A report of the Finance Committee set out the causes which induced the corporation to discontinue the service. It was done on the grounds of cost. Nothing ever changes, does it? And the report also made reference to Councillor A.J. Tier's adverse criticism of the authority. He was a great criticiser, was Councillor Tier, for alleged discrimination as between children resident in Pulrose and certain children attending the Douglas High Schools, and said the unwarranted suggestion was dealt with at once by a statement to the press. Mr. W.G. Qualtrough said the matter was not finally disposed of, it was only shelved, and he hoped the town council would still see its way to come to a satisfactory agreement on the matter. In answer to a question, it was stated that no further correspondence on the subject had been received from the town council. We go 9 years further hence, to 1949, the Isle of Man Times, Saturday, October the 1st. A bus versus train duel. As you were at Education Authority meeting, Peel parents want buses for school children. Petition by 373 people. Complaints of disorderly behaviour on trains. The greater part of the proceedings at the meeting of the Isle of Man Education Authority on Wednesday was taken up by a debate as to whether secondary school children travelling from Peel and district should travel by train, as at present. I'm sure there are some people listening to this who remember that. Or by bus. And by 12 votes to 10, the authority voted for no change. Arguments used during the lengthy debate included the disorderly behaviour of children on the trains, surely not in the 1940s, and the fact that supervision was difficult on the trains and would be much easier on the buses. The discussion arose when Mr. G. Taggart, chairman of the Finance Committee, moved a recommendation of the committee that the quotation of the Isle of Man Railway Company, amounting to £14,689 for the conveyance of school children during the year 1949-50, be accepted. This also covers the bus services and is a renewal of the services which were in operation last year, except that there is a reduction for the cancellation of a special bus between Port Erin and Castletown for the conveyance of children attending the Douglas High Schools, which is no longer required, arrangements having been made for the small number of children concerned to be conveyed as far as Castletown by bus. There's a plea for winter travel by bus. Mr. J.H. Moore, one of the members from the west of the island, said he moved the amendment in the Finance Committee, and he now moved an amendment that the children be conveyed by bus from the 1st of November until April. He did that for one reason, that Mr. Sheard said there might be difficulty in providing buses and drivers during the season. The season, do you remember the season? That was basically Easter to October, I think. He still pressed for the winter travel by bus, and in the future the company might get over its present troubles, and they could then press for an all-the-year-round bus service. There was nothing new in the request. During the life of the preceding authority, it was decided that the Peel children should receive their secondary education in Douglas, and there was no hope of getting a secondary school in the west. Well, there was, but you had to wait, another 27 years, I think, before QE2 school in Peel was opened. Impressed by the company's case, it goes on in quite a lengthy article in this about buses versus trains. A Mr. Taggart said it had been felt the sum involved in the travelling contract was fairly high. 14,500, was it? Almost £15,000. And that there was a tendency to increase year by year. No surprises there then. That being so, the Finance Committee was asked to consult the bus and railway authorities to see if they could achieve a reduction. They had a very friendly interview with Mr. Sheard, the manager of the railway and bus companies, and Mr. Cousins, the traffic superintendent. They put 2 points before these gentlemen. First, that they thought the introduction of the double-decker buses and the consequent saving in manpower should be reflected in the travelling contract, and secondly, they thought the fact that 1,000 children travelled at a cost of £15,000, which was £15 per head, seemed rather a steep figure. And it goes on later in the article to say, a savings of £500 in the south of the island, given that to the Peel children's travelling arrangements by bus, and the net cost for the winter would be £750, it was referred to as a mere flea bite. It's always down to money, isn't it? And I have heard tell of some stories on the old railway, school railway to Peel, climbing over the tops of the roof. Surely not then. The Alaman Times, Saturday, November the 15th, 1952, £1,000 a year loss on school buses. A statement in the report of the Tramways Committee of the Corporation that as the loss on school buses was now £1,000 a year, the alternative might have to be faced of either withdrawing the service or increasing the fare, was criticised by several members of the statutory meeting of the Council on Monday. Moving that the clause in the report be not confirmed, Councillor Percy Coop stated that while it was agreed there must be economies in the service, it should not be at the expense of school children. He suggested that a start might be made by withdrawing the Upper Douglas Governor's Bridge service, and added that the highest daily receipts were only £4 and the lowest £2. Even that is not a true picture, he stated, as the majority of the passengers got off before York Road is reached. Councillor R.C. Stephen seconded the amendment and stated he hoped the committee would bear in mind its responsibility to the public. There was an additional responsibility to respect of Pulrose and Williston, as people there were made to live outside the town without being given any choice. Councillor R.F. Quayle, chairman, replied that the reorganisation of winter routes had not yet been completed, but it was hoped to come to a satisfactory arrangement. There would be no trouble about Williston school children, as an extra service bus had been put on the route. The committee were determined to do their best to look after the children. The amendment was lost. The report was adopted. Losing £1,000 a year on the buses 70 plus years ago. 76 years ago? I tell you, nothing changes. The Alaman Times, Saturday, November the 8th, 1952. Rising cost of transport. Withdrawal of Douglas Corporation school bus or higher fares. Going along the same sort of lines. A complete withdrawal of all school buses run by the corporation, or an increase in the fare, may be alternatives forced upon the Transport Department by the rising costs. And this was coming from the same meeting, of course, £1,000 a year loss. And then we'll go to 1958 to finish. The Examiner, Thursday, May the 8th. Turning of school buses. A letter has been sent by the Castletown Commissioners to the Isle of Man Road Services Limited asking that school buses to and from Castle Rushen High School should use the school ground in which to turn. This, they claim, would avoid the inconvenience to traffic and residents at the junction of the Crofts and Arbury Street, which has been resulting through the present system. Turn your buses inside, man. Buses, costs, school children, trains. Tell you what, it all comes down to money, doesn't it? And it's all old news. Cheerio.
You're gonna be yesterday's news.